Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a prep coach. Today's guest is Cam Cheek. Cam, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So before we hit record, I asked you if you remembered how long ago it was since we last chatted on the podcast. You said it was June, which it seems like 2 years ago, but there's been a lot that's happened. So that's why I kind of wanted to get you back on, Cam. There's been a lot of exciting things that have happened in your life personally and professionally. So I wanted to get you back on and kind of catch up. So where I want to start, we're going to kind of go all over the place and I want to touch on some different things. But the first thing that was just announced, I think right around the Nationals time, is that you joined Camp Jansen. I know when we were on the podcast last time, you said that Matt's kind of been a mentor to you and he's been a big influence in your coaching. But talk to us a little bit about how this came about and just how exciting this is for you to be a part of Camp Jansen, really be on the Matt Jansen team now.
Yeah, man, it's something I'm extremely excited and grateful for. This dates back to, what was it, August of 2021? I believe I think Matt and I had ran into each other a couple of times because I had already signed on with Revive and Raw. But it was just some brief, like he just welcomed me and was just being a good host as I was down there into Stewart and visiting. So no real true engagement and just diving into intentional conversation. And I emailed Matt and basically was just, again, trying to reach out to someone just to pick their brain. I knew what he was doing worked. I knew with my eye that I had and being able to see this very specific detailed look, you can almost look at his guys without knowing they're his and be able to pinpoint, say like, oh, that's the look. And it was specifically for peaking that I feel like he was really elevating to another level with. And peaking is something that's always really, really intrigued me. And I have just always had passion and just kind of perfecting it. And there's no perfect way to do it. You can't pick up a book or go to a certain website. It's all instinct and feel and almost a little bit of an art. And so I reached out to Matt and I basically was just like, hey man, I know that you're a super busy businessman, father, coach. You have all these things going on in your life. And if you don't want to do this, I totally understand. Or if you just don't have the time, I totally understand. But I would love to just get on maybe an hour, 2-hour phone call and just pick your brain about peaking. And he responded back to me and said something along the lines of, hey man, I've heard nothing but good things about you and just who you are as a person. I honestly would love to be a long-term mentor for you. And getting that back, I thought the best possible response I could get was like, yes, man, like, yeah, we can get on a call and go over that. But it was more so like, yeah, but also let me guide you with everything else too. And it's not just been coaching that he's given me advice on and instruction and explained his own experiences and trials and errors. But, we talked about it last time. I had my son when I was 19 years old and that's about as unprepared as you can be when it comes to having a child. And anyone that has a kid anyways, whether they're prepared and well off financially or whatever, you're still unprepared when you have your first kid. And seeing someone like him that is achieving goals and setting goals that I have for myself, while also very clearly showing his passion on being a husband and a father and a strong foundation in his child's lives, was something that was inspiring me to look at and say, hey, I don't have to pick one or the other. I can be a great father. I can be a great coach. And there's a lot of people in this industry that I think maybe skip out would be the right word on starting families because they, if you're a bodybuilder, you kind of, maybe as a female, you kind of have to pick one or the other, at least for a certain time period. But it's almost like something like it's shied away from. Like it's a selfless thing to do, to have a child and take care of that child. And while it is selfless, it's not impossible to do both. So that was something that really just brought me into that. And, we had a time period where I would, buy calls from him, and, I'd pay for like 4 calls at a time. We'd do this and that. And then it just turned into him being like, hey man, if you have questions about something, like, you don't have to, I remember the one time I scheduled a call for a pretty simple thing. He was like, dude, you can just text me. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. And so it just kind of turned into back and forth. And, there just became more conversations that weren't as serious and weren't as professional, and more just kind of joking around, cutting up. I was starting to see Matt's goofy personality for who he is. And we meshed really well together. I think we share a lot of similar experiences from a foundational standpoint, and our beliefs and morals, just who we are. I've had many conversations with him where I'm just like, wow, you sound just like me, or I sound just like you. And so we just meshed really well together. I, in the past, did have my own team that I owned, or I guess was a part of. And I had coaches that were working under me, or I guess under me. I don't know. They were working on the same team as me, and I was guiding them. And as someone that, with knowing that I was the owner of that company, there were other things that I saw teams doing, like starting podcasts and putting out all these informational like graphs and photos and stuff like that. And I truly felt like that is something that goes into having a good marketing strategy as a team. And as the owner of the team, those are things that, with our foundation, I was the person that would probably come up with a lot of these things and have to really put them in motion. And my biggest focus at the moment, and then, was being the best coach that I could be. And I didn't want to take any time or efforts away from doing that. And I didn't want to guide a team knowing that I could be doing other things that I should be doing to really promote the team the best I can. And so it was something where I ended up reaching out to Matt, and I said, hey man, I don't know if you're looking to take on any more coaches, or, expand, just tell me to shut up if you need to. But I just told him, I said, honestly, like, I want to be a part of something much bigger than myself. And I felt like when I was owning and running my own team, the motivation to, I guess, do it for myself wasn't the same as if I was on this team with Matt and Justin Jacoby. And now if Matt was like, oh, I need you to get this done or do this, like it probably would be super easy to get it done, versus in the past, if I was telling myself I need to get it done, I was just kind of like, I don't really, like, what for? And the way that Matt's mentored me and guided me, it's been such a huge impact towards my life. And I've seen myself grow in correlation with information that he provides. And it's something where I know that he's going to want to pull back over the next couple of years. I don't know about couple of years, but within the next 10 years at least. And we've spoke on things and how he wants to kind of just guide me in a way to follow up in his footsteps and continue to just carry on this team and name. I don't even think he cares to carry on his name, but more so just make sure that he delivers all of the information that was at one time delivered to him and just keeps passing it down. So that's how that came about. And as soon as I texted him that, he messaged me back pretty much instantly. He loved the message and then said something like, honestly, man, there's no one else in the world I'd rather bring onto this team. And I remember screenshotting it, sending it to my girlfriend, and then calling her and being like, go look at our text. And it was something we got in motion very quick, but we're both super excited about it. Just, working together with people that have those same goals, it makes it a lot easier to do when things get tough. And I think as a coach, when you're just working behind a computer all day, it can get a little lonely. So just kind of having each other is really important, in my opinion.
Awesome, man. Okay. Now I want to ask you, since you brought it up, you said, you could see Matt Jansen clients without even knowing, they were necessarily Matt's, and they had this look. I've heard other people kind of talk about that. So what is the Matt Jansen look in terms of athletes? And why don't you just touch on that for a quick minute?
Yeah, man. So it's, they're matching all these criteria that go into being great bodybuilders. And it's not just people that he's getting in condition and nailing these peaks. It's people that are also holding fullness, that you can tell he's put his foot down in situations and had that athlete stay patient so they can continue to develop areas to balance out their physique. It's, their posing is on point. It's just a certain standard that is met by these athletes. And, there's going to be some that we just don't fully match the standard on, but for the majority of those, you can see that across the board with what he brings. The body fat levels are where they need to be. The peak is on point. The tans are on point. It's all the tiny little things that go into truly checking off all the boxes and getting down to the meticulous things. And ultimately, long story short and summarizing it, it's doing everything that is need to be done to win. And that's another thing where him and I align really well is, we love to win, and we want to win everything we can. And so it's doing the necessary to make sure that the outcome stays the same and that it's a positive one.
Cool. Okay. So now when it comes to coaching, you kind of alluded to it. I'm going to use a different word, but how much of coaching, especially like Cam, when we're talking about like peak week and peaking athletes, to step on stage, how much of it is intuitive? How much is it just like kind of like maybe a natural gift or something that you have to just learn or refine after seeing so many physiques over, however many years? I mean, talk about just the intuitive side of being a coach, because I think just like any other avenue, whether it's like a artist or it's a bodybuilding coach or, it's a school teacher, whatever profession you want to pick, I think there's always some sort of natural talent or ability within each profession or career. So just touch on that.
That's a good question. And I'm going to try and answer it just off the rip, because I've never truly thought about it like that. So I think the perspective on if there's intuition that goes into being a great coach, I think that answer would vary from someone that does have skin in the game and has accomplished things as a coach versus someone that hasn't. Because the coach that does have success and skin in the game, they're probably going to say, yes, there is intuition in it. But the way that I look at it is, what is intuition, right? And some may say, it's instinct, right? Well, when we think about instinct, or at least when I think about instinct, it almost just sounds like you know what to do without even thinking about it or knowing what to. It's almost just like it's just there, right? But in reality, it's not that it's just there. I didn't come out at 10 years old, I couldn't peak someone, you know what I mean? Or couldn't make a good gut call. I couldn't even see it. Everyone would have looked the same when I was younger. But I think intuition really is just a combination of foundational knowledge, experience, having an eye. A big part of it, I think, is having confidence in yourself and being able to be observant, especially when it comes to peaking. Everything is trends. Everything is, that there's rules on how things should go sometimes, but in reality, what's happening is all that matters. So we can always predict what's going to happen or this and that, but we can't get stuck to, we should be able to do this and this happens. It's like, well, the last time you did it, it made the look worse. So that's out the books, and it's being able to observe and really pick up on those trends and almost just highlight them in a way where that light bulb goes off in your head and you can recognize patterns, and being able to pivot and shift with confidence that allows you to continue to fully execute down that direction and trend that you've picked up on. Because without confidence, you can't fully immerse yourself in dive into that one direction that you're going in. You can't really be 1 foot in, 1 foot out when you're peaking someone or, kind of anything, especially if you really want to do it successfully.
Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit, because like we said, since we last chatted on the podcast in June, there's been so much awesome stuff that's unfolded in your life. And, if people want to go back and listen or watch, the first episode with you, Cam, we kind of get in the normal typical BTM episode and get into your backstory. But what I want to ask is, with all of this stuff that's happening, and I can't remember if I've had so many conversations on the podcast since this past June. I can't remember if we talked on it or not, but in terms of like goal setting and kind of like, working towards something in your life, whether that's professionally or personally, what does that look like for you? Are you writing things down? Is it just in the back of your head? Do you have a vision board? Like, walk us through kind of that process and those steps that you take to pursue goals or kind of whatever you want to pursue in your life.
Sure. So I know that there's a lot of people that say, like, if you have goals, you need to write them down. If I have goals, they're burning in my mind until I accomplish them. And so I just don't need to write them down. If I have someone going and doing a show like Shelby, my girlfriend, before she did nationals, we wrote on the little whiteboard in the house before we packed up and left, Shelby will win the overall at nationals. And I'll do little things like that just because it's fun. And I think when you do things like that, you make yourself have confidence going into situations. Now, I think the last time we talked on the podcast, there were 3 main goals that I spoke on with you. One was, having someone turn pro in bikini, winning an overall at a national show, and then winning a pro show and having that Olympia qualification. And that's how I know we spoke in June, because June 18th, I had Emily Pribula go to junior nationals, and she won her pro card in bikini and won the overall. And then 4 weeks later, that's when JT came down to Atlanta here, and we went and did the Atlanta Pro, and he won that show, which checked off the third box. Those 2 shows checked all 3 of them off. And then went up to Chicago 6 days later and won that one. So that was that. More personal goals that I had for myself was, this year I really wanted to build more confidence within myself as a coach. And I think it was just being younger, you kind of question, am I doing the right things I need to be doing? And it was up until maybe a year and a half ago, I still was questioning myself, saying like, do I just keep getting lucky at these shows? Like, am I just, and when you're having success as a coach, or at least from my experience, you hear a lot of like, oh, he's got it, he's great, he's this and that. And, it's really nice to hear those things, but really and truly, until you believe it yourself, it's a tough road. And there's a lot of nights where you're sitting there like, man, like, I just feel like I'm faking it and making it at this point. And it's almost like that imposter syndrome. And so something that I had as a goal for myself, and one of the things that Matt and I talked about a year ago on a call, is we jumped on a call, and I remember one of them, I was like, I don't have any specific people that I want to break down or look at. I was just like, I want to just kind of lay out what my weaknesses are and, attack them. And I was like, dude, like, go ham, like whatever it is, like chew me up, spit it out. Like, I don't even care. Like, let me have it. And he was like, honestly, man, I think you just need to believe in yourself and trust yourself more. And hearing it from him was a bit different than hearing it from someone else, because that's someone who is in the shoes that I would like to walk in one day. And it's not that the words of others don't mean a lot to me when I do hear compliments, but hearing it from someone that also has the eye, that also understands it, it's just a bit different. It's like someone that's going in and doing a show and they're still 8 weeks out and everyone's telling like, dude, you're shredded. And it's like, no, I'm not. So hearing that from him was just like, just believe in yourself. And then being able to acquire that confidence throughout the year allowed me to just enjoy things a lot more and be happy. We also, another personal goal of mine, I didn't necessarily set a deadline on it, but more so just wanted to really work hard to get to this point in life, was being able to purchase my first home. So the Monday after we got back from nationals, we went and closed on our home. I'm going to finally be able to give my son his room, and there's a little background a backyard with a playground in it. And I just know we're gonna move in probably after the start of the new year. But I can't wait until he just comes over that one weekend, and I'm like, oh, we're going somewhere different this weekend, and take him there and take him into his room and just be like, oh, this is your room, buddy. And he's gonna look at me and be like, this is my room. Like, yep, it's all yours. Destroy it.
Very cool, Cam. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about nationals. I know your girlfriend Shelby did amazing, so I want you to talk about that. And then Bart got his pro card, which I've had him on a couple of times. Super cool kid. So why don't you talk about that, and then we'll get into a little bit of a Olympia talk. So talk a little bit about nationals.
Sure, man. So I had 3 athletes that I took down with me. Shelby Talon, which is my girlfriend, Bart Tompkins, and Baran Khaleesi. Shelby competed in wellness. Bart was a welterweight, and then Baran competed in men's physique. Shelby ended up winning Class C and the overall in wellness. Bart got runner-up in the welter division, which turned him pro. And then Baran ended up taking his second call out in men's physique. And it was a fun time, man, especially prepping Shelby for that. It was special to me. It was only the second show she had ever done. She had done her first show back in April. And it was it was only the second time I'd put a wellness athlete into the show. Earlier that summer, I had a girl that did Junior USA's and Universe, and both times she fell short of her pro card one time. And so halfway through the year, I kind of added another little goal for myself, which was get a wellness pro card. But it was a different feeling prepping her because it's, she's my significant other. And as a coach, I'm someone that's super competitive anyways, but there's this protective nature that I have over her. And so as the show got closer and closer, it was almost like this aggressive competitiveness of like, oh, you think you're going to show up and take my girl's dreams from her. And I have a way of controlling that not happening. Like, yeah, right. Please show up. And so there was that kicked in, and being able to not only just go through day-to-day life as one, but also have a big goal that we share together and work together against everybody else. It almost felt like we were in our own little bubble against the world, which was a lot of fun doing so down there. And one thing I do remember is outside of a couple like big shows, I don't get crazy nervous anymore. I also have my little like pre-show nerves to an extent, but not like when I first started. But the night before her show, I was so nervous. I was texting some of my buddies. I was like, dude, I don't know what is going on. I can't show her that I'm nervous. I got to just stay calm and collected. I was like, but I feel like I'm shaking. Like I was so nervous. And I think that was just the boyfriend in me. Yeah. And I remember after she had went to bed, I was like, yeah, babe, like I gotta go run to the store and get like Baran or Bart something. And I just went and got in the car, turned the music on, and just drove for like an hour. And was just driving in circles around Orlando and just couldn't shake it. And I remember before she went on for stage, I almost felt nauseous. Wow. And it's been a while since I felt like that, but that occurred. And, Bart and I had a really great journey throughout the whole year as well. And, there's nobody I could have wanted it more for with him to be able to take that and, just share that first experience and first time hitting the stage together, being him, getting his pro card. And Bart, you know how he is and his character, like you can't not love it for him. So he was on top of the world. I remember after like prejudging, because he split center, he came up and, and Bart's a short guy compared to me. I'm 6'1" and Bart's, I don't know, 5'5" maybe. I remember him just running up to me, picking me up off the ground. And I was just like, all right, Bart. He was so pumped. And then it was Baran's first time that he had done a national show. He came from Turkey and just recently got his citizenship. So it was his first go to national show. And, men's physique is just a stacked division. There's a lot of guys in those classes. There's just areas we still can improve on. So it was no knock on him, nothing I was super upset about, more so just wanted to get that initial analysis of where he stood up there. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was a ton of fun.
Cool, man. Okay, before we get into the Olympia talk, something just popped in my head because I've had tons of your athletes on the podcast since we were on in June. Some guys that haven't even really competed yet, but the reoccurring theme, there's several of them in terms of your athletes, what they say about you and kind of the process that you put them through. But one of the reoccurring themes, which I want to bring up and I want you to talk a little bit more in depth about, Cam, is that you're very serious about their health. And I think that's something we're starting to see more coaches and more athletes, talk about the importance of health and health phases and things like that. But why don't you just talk about however you want to take it, but let's just talk about approaching being a competitive athlete, a bodybuilder in a more healthy manner, because we know, especially once you start taking, going the enhanced route, there's going to be health risks, right? But you can mitigate some of that stuff, I think. So talk about health, why health is important to you in terms of being a coach and getting your athletes healthy before they would really, go much further.
Sure, man. And when it comes to health and being a coach and working with people that they come to you to make them the best bodybuilders they can be. And there's some athletes out there that if they didn't have someone sitting there and kind of pumping the brakes and be like, hey man, I'm holding you back because this is not going to be a good direction to go in for your health, they would just let full loose and go. And so there's a certain awareness that I have to build around where that athlete's vision is in terms of their own risk to reward when it comes to bodybuilding. And I'm okay with letting my, lever move based off of that. I say it anytime I'm working with any females or have a consult with them, how much we use drugs, the doses of that, it's really set by where their morals are, especially when we're talking about side effects that are changing physiology. But there's always still that limit where I'm like, yeah, I'm still not going to push that hard. It's just not happening. And, explaining to them that your morals are the first thing I care about. My next step there is educating you on the expectation that's going to come out of that. And so that's one of the things I try and get across there. And it's tough as a coach because there's a middle ground that you sit on between trying to keep them healthy, but also trying to make them the best bodybuilder they can be. But then there's another understanding that comes from a certain threshold of health has to be maintained for someone to be able to become the best bodybuilder they can be. It doesn't matter how many drugs you take, it's still going to take a long time to put on this muscle. And the margin of difference that probably changes from someone doubling what they're taking to what they're currently taking, the amount of muscle difference that's going to be there is not the same amount of difference that their blood work would be if they just ran the cycle they were running versus double it. The health risk is going to be higher than the margin of muscle growth that comes. I would think so. I haven't had one person run a cycle, then double the doses and compare, but that's my assumption there. And just having an understanding that longevity is going to breed success in this sport. You have to keep people in the game. And, I've had one or two athletes before where they're just more sensitive and prone to issues. And usually you see that same sensitivity to someone who also has a damaged organ or has had some kind of, quote unquote, failure, because there's different stages to organ failure. But it's almost like someone who gets a concussion in football. Once you start getting them, they happen a lot easier. And when that happens, and once you just push beyond that point, you can't use the same doses that you were using in the past. You can't allow certain stress to come onto the body to the same degree because it impacts it to a different degree now. And that's the biggest thing is, it's an interesting question. It's like, do you really care about the athlete's health, or do you care about keeping their health in a spot that allows them to be the best bodybuilder they can be long term? And I think most of us as coaches fall into that second one, where more so we're maintaining their health only to a limit that allows them to be the best bodybuilder they can be, whether we want to admit it or not. Because if we did truly care about their health, then we wouldn't be putting them on cycles and be pushing them to be bodybuilders. And I mean, whether someone's going to listen to this and take that as like, oh, he doesn't care about health. Again, like I said, I'm not scared to necessarily admit it or say like, hey, that probably falls true. But that's really the nature of the beast with it, and understanding that we're maintaining their health so that they can bodybuild, rather than, just maintaining their health for, whatever reason.
Touch on gut health. That's something that, is really big within the bodybuilding, competitive bodybuilding world, in terms of a lot of people have gut issues, probably everybody, whether they know it or not. So, how often are you working with clients and athletes, Cam, in terms of specifically correcting gut health related issues?
I'll be honest with you. I haven't had just a crazy amount of just these gut health cases. And I think for a couple reasons. One, I think I don't market myself as someone that treats gut issues. So it's not that I don't welcome it, but I don't attract it. I'm not the walking solution for those that do have these issues. I also will say too that I'm no gut health specialist. That's like one of the things I'll say on a consult with someone. If they're asking like, are you comfortable with this? Are you comfortable on female hormones? I'm like, I'm pretty much good on everything unless you got some really wacky gut stuff. At that point, I'll bring someone else into the picture to help. But I've still worked with a handful of athletes and just don't run into a ton of issues. And I think the biggest thing that it boils down to is, the stress levels that they're having, making sure that their diet's in check. And if their stomach's not agreeing with something, then don't eat it. Making sure hormones are in check. One thing that I will see pretty commonly, or I don't want to say commonly, but amongst the issues that it happens more regularly, is just acid reflux due to low stomach acid production compared to the amount of calories and protein that are eaten within a diet. That's usually a pretty easy fix. Sometimes some leaky gut symptoms, just showing signs of maybe a damaged mucosal lining of the stomach. And I mean, really not a ton of like issues that have came my way. And I've talked to Matt about it sometimes too. And I've been like, hey man, do you see, like, I feel like there's all these specialists nowadays. Like, what is happening? And he was just like, honestly, man, like, I think there's definitely some people that have issues and are just more prone to it, unfortunately. But him and I chopped it up to, if you're doing all the things you need to be doing and managing stress and, being able to control a diet and guide the diet in the right way, you're probably not going to run into as many of these issues. But yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, Olympia talk, man. So you had a classic physique athlete, JT, compete this year at the Olympia. So why don't you talk about well, first of all, I saw on your Instagram that you weren't going to be at the Olympia. And then I saw pictures on your Instagram. It looked like you were at the Olympia. So first of all, talk about that, and then talk about the experience, talk about how JT did and what you guys are planning on doing in the future going forward.
Sure, man. So I think it was a long past month and a half, and I was really getting, I was missing on sleep, and just I hit a point where it was right after Shelby show in nationals, and I remember we drove all the way back home, and I'd only slept 1 hour the night before her show, 2 hours the night before the guy's show the next day, maybe like 6 the next night, and it felt like I just blinked and woke up again. Drove back home 7 hours, and I remember getting back home at like 6 or 7 p.m. And Sunday is usually a day I do a lot of check-ins. And I remember I was super tired and I was pretty mentally burnt at that point. But I was just like, you know what? Like, cool. I'm gonna embrace it. And I'm gonna push even harder and see how hard I can push. And I remember I stayed up to like 3:30 in the morning that night working, just finishing everyone's update before I went to bed. Next day, got up and worked from like 8 or 9 a.m. to like 11 p.m. that night. And so there was just a lot of days of me feeling tired, but then looking at it and being like, okay, cool, let me see how hard I can push myself. And so I did that. I wasn't in the gym a whole lot. I was just prioritizing coaching, wasn't eating a whole lot. And you know, I'm sure you've heard everybody's getting sick right now. So I think there was something going around. I didn't test positive for flu, but before I had even tested, I have an athlete of mine that's a doctor, and I was just like, hey, you know, I don't know if I have a sinus infection, strep throat, flu, prescribe me everything. And so I got, you know, prescriptions written up for all of that. And at this point, that was the day we were supposed to get out there, maybe the day before. I think it was the day before. And then the next morning, Shelby and we had our bags packed, Uber to the airport at 5 in the morning. And I'm sitting in the car riding to the airport, just sweating and just felt super terrible and run down. Um, and I just told her and the Uber driver, I was like, we got to turn back around. Like, I can't get out there. I don't want to get him sick. And mentally, I don't know if me going out there and doing all the travel is going to break me down even more to where, you know, you get sick, your brain doesn't turn the same. And so we ended up heading back home. And I think at that point, that was my second or third day on all those antibiotics. And as that day started to progress, I started to feel a lot better. And I don't remember, I think I let another day pass. And I remember hitting up JT's girlfriend and I was like, hey, you know, I think I'm gonna book a flight and get out there tomorrow morning. And so I flew out that following morning, showed up, um, got another hotel room, and you know, we kind of went in and did the thing. So it was tough because I thought I was going to miss that first Olympia experience, and that was something that, you know, I dreamed of. You know, we were talking about some of the rough times I'd gone through on the last podcast. That was something I was like, man, like I couldn't even imagine being there one day, and kind of feel like it was stripped away from me. Like there was lots of nights and like moments I had over that period of me being sick of just like emotionally just breaking down and crying and just like, you know, like I can't believe it. Like what is happening? So I ended up getting out there.
Okay, so how did the experience go? Walk us through kind of how JT did from your perspective and his perspective. What was the experience just like being out there, seeing all these different athletes and, you know, probably connecting with some really cool people? Just kind of touch on that. Walk us through that, Cam.
Sure, man. So yeah, it was a long year for JT. We started his prep in January, and there were maybe a few weeks after the Chicago and Atlanta show where I was just a lot more laid back with him, but he never put on enough body fat to ever satisfy his hunger and just kind of come back to a normalcy within his quality of life. So regardless of him having a little bit of a break, he never really had true relief. So it was just a long year, and you know, the last couple weeks, just kind of having a couple slip ups, but really just trying to, you know, mentally just keep him there and be like, come on, man. You know, I remember his girlfriend telling me that where he's got his whole posing little check-in set up in the garage. She walked out there one day, and there was a piece of paper that he had, I guess, ripped out and put on the wall, and it just said, "Do it for Cam," on the piece of paper. And so I knew at that point I don't think he was necessarily doing it for himself anymore, because his main goal that he had was winning a pro show. And I think once he had accomplished that, it was harder for him to find that motivation to keep going. But we ended up making it there and navigated and troubleshot through everything we could. Um, so how do I get into us? I guess he won't care me saying he had a slip up on his diet at about 7 days out. And I didn't want to really say anything about it, but kind of getting into how the peak week went, it kind of had to. So we had to make weight at 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, which was, I think, 3 days out. Well, at nights, he was usually weighing after this had occurred, he was around 224, 225. His weight cap was 207. So I had to get him down roughly 20 pounds from his PM weight. And after that little slip up, weight kept holding. And I was I was worried. I was worried we weren't going to make weight. And I was not going to push him beyond a point of just pure dehydration to an extent that would really put risk on his health. So I think at 2 days out from weigh-ins, I ended up moving him to, man, his diet, it was only like 800 calories of food that day or something. No, I think that day was more like 11 or 1200, but it was just like 4 or 5 meals of just chicken and asparagus. And he was pushing, I think, 2.5 gallons of water, just flushing as much as he could. And he didn't come down a whole lot the day after that. So I was like, oh, okay, great. Well, then the next day, I moved him to just 4 meals. And one of the 3 was the chicken and asparagus meal. And the other 3 were just a scoop and a half of whey. And so he was basically on a liquid diet, and it came out to being 870 calories of food that day. And he was doing 1,000 calories of cardio. So he was doing more cardio than he was even consuming in food. And then I tapered his water throughout the day based on how he was weighing and stuff. Essentially, he woke up that morning at 1 day out from weigh-ins at 215.6. And I remember by the time he went to bed that night, he was going to bed at 209.7. And so we had pulled him from, 2 days prior going to bed at like 225 to now going to bed at 209.7. And then woke up the day of weigh-ins, like 0.8 pounds under his cap, but we had to then make it to 8 p.m. to make weight. So I think I had given him like whey and water and like some coffee sparingly throughout the day just to try and put something in his stomach and keep fluids moving. But he basically fasted all day long until making weight. As soon as I initially brought food in with him, he was just soaking it up really well. And for the most part, his peak did go really well. Looking back, I wish I would have fed him a little bit more the night before the show, and then the morning of, I think he came in a little bit flat. But there was also, which was a good learning experience for me, and I guess I don't know if it's just because they'll have that many people, like I had to learn it like this. But, they came out for initial comparisons where they lined him up. And I knew there was going to be this huge gap of time in between when he was going to go on for his individual. And I told him before prejudging, because I already knew that I think when he came out for his initial comparison, he was where he needed to be. It's hard. I was kind of further away, so it's hard to see, and they don't do stage shots from the comparisons. So I think he came out on point there, but I knew how quick he was going through food that I told him, I was like, hey, as soon as you get off stage, go get your phone. And I guess for whatever reason, I don't know if he just didn't do it or they didn't let him, but he didn't go grab his phone. And I called him a few times and texted him, and ended up after like 20 minutes, I was like, oh, it's not happening. So he came out for his individual comparison, and he was a little bit flatter than I wanted him to be, which is, it sucks when you're a perfectionist, but I also know too, at the end of the day, it wouldn't have really made a difference when it comes to his placing and stuff. The biggest thing was just that he had fun up there. They played a song that he could really vibe well with. And, he was able to hit his little signature Pelkey pose at the end of it, has a photo of that. So hindsight 2020, and also kind of learned in the future, like basically engrave it into my athlete. If we have 60 people in a class, like, hey, your phone needs to be on your body as soon as you get off stage.
Right.
But going out there, I was able to spend time with Matt some and hang out at his hotel, and he had me kind of come around with him and watch Sean and Nick and Charles in person. And I remember when I first got over there, he was like, I got something I want to show you. And I was like, oh, what is it? Well, it was Sean. And being able to see Sean pose in person, the hotel room was just berserk. Same with Nick and Charles. And then ended up going with him and his wife to finals that night to see them win that 212 title. It was just, it's crazy when you actually personally know the person. It feels like it's like right there versus just seeing it online or just being some big name person in the industry. But it was really cool being able to see just the raw emotions and just, a friend being able to accomplish that again. And just that atmosphere was crazy out there. That was the first time I'd been to the Olympia, and I told myself I wasn't going to go until I had an athlete that was competing in it. So it was fun to finally be able to be like, oh, yep, well, I'm going now. So
cool, man. Now, did you get to see any of the open men's competition then, Cam?
yeah, so I watched that Friday night. I watched the open men's that night after the 212s went on.
Okay. I know obviously, Nick is, a client athlete of Matt. So you might have a little bit of bias there, but just from your honest perspective, I mean, just talk a little bit about, from your coach's perspective, talk about what you kind of saw at the prejudging for open men's. I mean, you feel like Hottie was, clear number one. Just give us a little bit of your perspective, because it's kind of fun to actually talk to somebody that was there in person.
Sure. So, one, I talked to Matt about it, but there was a lot of guys that almost seemed to come in off, and not just from their condition. There were guys that definitely too missed their marks with body fat levels too, but just the peak, it was either they were full and on point, but there wasn't a whole lot of like crispness that you usually see whenever prejudging's in the morning. And it's just because they went on stage at 10:30 that night, and it's hard to nail a peak. And I mean, I'll say it. I've said it before to people that it doesn't matter how good a coach is. Like, we're still people, and it's hard to just be perfect like that. And we're not going to be perfect all the time. And just across the board, I remember, I know Nick even looked better for Saturday, which they didn't go on as late, I don't believe. I think towards the end, but that first initial, shot out there at 10:30 p.m., athletes have all the nerves and stress, where it's different going into the second day. You've already got up there. Like, a lot of that stress and nerve has gone away. But it's hard to nail a peak. And I think that there were a lot that just came in a little bit, just not where they needed to be from a peak standpoint there. I do think that Hottie still looked incredible Friday night as well. It was cool to see Derek come out there. At first, I thought he was going to be too small whenever he came out individually. And then they put them up next to each other. And when you're able to kind of take away the height difference and look at them from a structural and development standpoint, it was like, oh man, he's up there with those guys. Nick, like I said, he came in a little bit sharper on Saturday, and I wasn't for sure until I saw stage shots later that Friday I thought he could have been a little bit sharper, which Matt knows too, and he'll be able to adjust. But I mean, overall, it was crazy to see. It was a good lineup.
Yeah.
It was an incredible lineup.
I want to ask you about Rami, because obviously I only see stuff through the lens of social media and YouTube and things like that, what experts and non-experts are saying. But I mean, was Rami, was he really that off in terms of like what you've seen in terms of pictures in the past? Like, what was the deal with him? Because to have a two-time champion go, back-to-back Olympia winner to 5th place, I mean, it's unheard of. It's never happened, I think, except for maybe one other time. So
yeah, when I was watching it, I had a buddy that was back home watching it on the live stream. And, when you're watching someone that has won the world title of best bodybuilder in the world over the last 2 years, you have a certain expectation that you have for them. And when he came out, I was almost like, one, I'd never seen him in person before. I'd only seen photos and stuff like that. But he came out, and I was almost like, I texted my buddy, and I was just like, hey man, is it just me, or does he look a little funky? Because I know the live stream's a bit more clear and closer too. But I was like, I feel like something's a little off here. And then when he turned around to the back, say his lower back looked a little bit off, and he just didn't have as much of like that crispness, and just I don't know, like he was a little squishy. And again, I think some of it was body fat levels, but I think some of it was also probably his stress levels and pressure that he felt going into that show, as well as just, again, it's hard to peak at that time at night. And, I guess they were able to nail it the last couple of years, but again, like I said, as coaches, we're not all perfect. And sometimes, the reality is that not being perfect is going to cause a change like that. And we've seen it, with Phil Heath before, and, it just kind of happens, and when people are like, oh, what happened? It's just like life. I don't know. Like, like we're not all perfect all the time. And I think it's tough for some of these bodybuilders. And I know us as coaches too, it can be tough when people just expect that perfection. And when you really get good at something, that there's almost like no breathing room to fail. And it's sometimes people forget, like, damn, they are still human, and it's a lot of pressure. And I think that's probably what happened. And I mean, he's still one of the best in the world, but I think that was the biggest thing, is they just missed.
Okay, this is kind of a question that I just want to ask you. Now, when you're because like you keep saying, like, you're a human, right? I'm a human. We're fans of bodybuilding, I think, first, and then obviously because the opportunities you have now as a coach and being in with Camp Jansen, stuff like that, you're going to get to see these top level Olympians and Mr. Olympians. But is it, I mean, when you're like sitting in a hotel room and you're getting to see, like, Sean, pose, and you get to, see Nick Walker pose. I mean, is it kind of surreal for you? Like, during this whole Olympia weekend, was it a little surreal? Did you have to like kind of like pinch yourself every once in a while and be like, dude, like, what's going on here? Or do you just kind of go with the flow?
So I would say if it was earlier on into when, like, the stages of Matt and I's friendship, probably so, because that's how it felt with Matt. He was someone that when I first got into the game, I mean, he was at the top then, and is only higher now, but it was someone that was just this, and I don't want to say an idol, but I just really looked up to and was inspired by. And I remember when our friendship started to first develop and everything like that, there were times where I just almost felt like I was walking on eggshells. And I remember, to the point where I fully just wasn't like nervous to be myself around him anymore. I like called it out. I was like, yeah, it can be intimidating sometimes and this and that. And I was like, but I've just realized, he's goofy if you get to know him. He's a big hearted guy. He takes care of his people. He's a little closed off for, reasons, and just, having a bigger name, you kind of got to be careful. But, when you just realize they're just people at the end of the day, and it kind of just takes all that away. And, whenever I was in there with him and Sean, they were just talking about non-bodybuilding things and just stuff that was going on in Sean's life. And, I had talked to him some about his baby that's going to be born soon, and I think it probably any day now. It wasn't really that odd to me anymore. It was still really wacky seeing him pose in person, but when he was just sitting there just chilling, he was just a normal person. I've known Nick, so when I went and saw Nick, that wasn't, and I don't want to take away from him and his physique as a bodybuilder, but it wasn't like anything. I want to say it's not that it was anything special, but it was just like, it's just Nick. Charles was super cool. Super cool guy. It was cool to finally meet him. But it wasn't necessarily like a pinch me, I'm dreaming kind of thing. It was just like, damn, this is what it looks like to be where I want to be. Like, having that goal that I know that's in my mind, but actually being able to sit in the room and basically watch a shadow of what my dream is, to sit there and see that is what was really special to me.
Super cool, man. That's awesome. I love it, Cam. What are you, what's kind of like your goal, or some of your goals going into 2023? I'm sure you probably got some burning goals in the back of your head. Can you share a couple of them more professionally, kind of with your coaching as opposed to personally?
For sure, man. I haven't fully sat down and thought them out just yet. I want to be back at the Olympia stage. I have two that I want to get there, that I think have a really good shot of getting there. And so I want to try and get at least one back to the Olympia stage. But I think my biggest goal is just continuing just to refine processes and, learning how to keep balance with everything too, and continue to establish just a good professional role in these athletes' lives and guide them. I'll come up with some concrete goals for you at some point, and I'll send them to you because we'll recap on them. But that was something I was wanting to wait to kind of get through the Olympia and the new year to really think on. But overall, it's just every year, really the goals, the foundation of them stay the same. And when I speak on so and so making it to some show or this division winning this one, really it's just a result of all the processes that are being refined and improved on, and experience being shown through decisions that I make within these athletes. But like I said, I'll get some concrete goals thought out and send them over to you.
Yeah, no, that's cool, man. It's cool. There's other things going. I understand. Looking back on this year, then Cam, what's kind of been, and it can be professionally, it can be personally, it can be both, however you want to take it. What's kind of been the biggest lesson, or a couple of the biggest lessons you feel like you're going to take away from 2022?
Believing in myself and having that self-confidence. That's been everything. And it's still a battle. It's not something that I've fully worked through. I grew up an overweight kid, and I think that's really what it stems from. Kind of getting picked on and just lacking self-confidence. And, it's forcing me to put myself in situations that are uncomfortable, but putting myself there because I know I'm meant to be there. And just having more and more experience of going through these situations and coming out on the other side, proving myself to myself. I've just gotten to a point with a lot of things where I don't really care to, prove myself right to other people or prove someone wrong. I'm more so just that peace that you have going to bed at night when you're believing in yourself and that you're what everyone else says you are or can be. That's really what's most important to me.
Cool, man. All right, dude. I think we covered a lot of topics. We definitely got caught up. Anything else you want to leave with us, Cam? Any final thoughts? Any final words? How can people reach out to you if they want to, have a consultation or possibly get coached by you? Give us whatever you got in closing, my man.
Sure, man. First off, again, just always want to thank you for having me on here. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. And I also want to thank you for all the support that you always provide towards my athletes and getting them on here, giving them a little bit of a spotlight that usually doesn't happen within bodybuilding for the most of us. And again, just being a good support system for my people, that means more to me than really I could say. I thank you to whoever watches this and even some of the names that were mentioned throughout this podcast, and the impacts that they've had on me. I guess if you want to reach out to me, my name on Instagram is Cameron_Cheek1. There's a link to an application form in my bio, but if you have any questions, you can just shoot me a DM. They may get a little bit lost, so I might take some time to respond back, but anybody can feel free to reach out. I'm going to respond. So again, just thank you for having me on, and I always look forward to any future conversations that we have.
Sure. You're welcome, Cam. I appreciate you coming on, dude, and taking some time out of your busy schedule to chop it up. We'll definitely get you on early in 2023, and we'll kind of catch up at that point. Okay, my man?
For sure. Sounds good,
Cool.
man.
All right. All of you who are tuning into another episode of Behind the Muscle Podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. I appreciate all of you. I value all of you. And as I always say, and as I will continue to say, if it weren't for all of you, all of your support, the podcast simply wouldn't exist. So thank you guys for all the continued support. Thank you for following us on Instagram, subscribing on YouTube, for all the positive comments, all the DMs, the feedback. It's really exciting. This is just the beginning. If you guys have not hit that subscribe button in regards to Behind the Muscle Podcast on YouTube yet, please do so. And then also please take this episode with Cam, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Cam, tag Behind the Muscle podcast so that we know you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.